Welcome. Welcome to all the attendees of the World Water Conference, those who are here with us today on site, and those who are joining us online. It's a great pleasure to have you here with us today. This session is called Exploring Gender, Water Research, and Interventions by African Women. What we really want to talk about here is how to ensure equal participation and leadership of women in African communities, both in leadership roles and in decision-making bodies. That is what our focus is about today. Just to get some of the housekeeping issues off, for the first 20 minutes, our online audience will be able to ask us questions on the chat. We have an online moderator, Professor Sherry Yanello from Texas A&M University, who is monitoring the chat and who will answer all the questions for you. After 20 minutes, we will be focused on the on-site audience in the room with us, and this will give us an opportunity to address and exchange information with you and mingle with you. Yeah? Okay, so access to clean water and sanitation, we all recognize is a basic human right. Nevertheless, in many communities around the world, this basic human right is not met. The UN has elevated this issue for the past few decades, and they have asked local communities to get more involved in water management and governance, and especially to include in the management and government women so that women's special needs for water and sanitation are included and their perspectives are included in the decision-making bodies. Women play a very important role. They are gatherers of water, they store water, they manage water in homes. Nevertheless, their perspective is often not included during the governance and decision making. And so the UN has asked local and national entities to promote the participation of women in these critical upfront areas. So what we have today is, joining me today are three wonderful, amazing women who have been deeply involved in water issues for a number of years now, and who have made significant inroads in trying to get into the leadership position. As you can imagine, they have encountered many barriers, and what they will be sharing with us today is their stories of how they assumed leadership positions, the barriers they encountered, the lessons they learned, and what they can share with us going forward so that we can be more successful at it. Joining me today is Agnes Luhanga from Malawi, Lulama Goveni from South Africa, and Angela Kopemva. I'm sure I messed up the names, but they will from Zambia, but they will tell you their real names. So with that introduction, I'd like to leave the floor to them. And again, as I said, what I would like them to do is to share those stories in which you assumed a leadership role, how the project went, what barriers you encountered, barriers you could overcome, and those you couldn't, and therefore the lessons you took from that for other, hopefully, bigger leadership roles you will assume in the future. So, having said that, Angela, you're going to start first.
Thank you very much, Pushpa, and once again, a warm welcome to everybody here present and also the people joining us online. It's truly a great honor to be here, and I extend my gratitude to the organizing team for putting this together. My real name, my real names are Angela Kapembwa, and I'm coming in from Zambia. I am a civil engineer by profession, but I specialized in water and sanitation, and I've been practicing in this space for the past 6 years. And my interests lie in water sanitation and hygiene practices in communities that are in need of these. I'm a project manager with Border Zambia, and we have 2 projects running under our portfolio, and that's the Wash and Soul project, as well as the Livable Cities project, and I'm responsible for the Livable Cities project. And one activity which I will share with you today is the Long Acres Market waste management pilot project. And the objective of this project was really to come up with sanitation interventions for sanitation needs in a public space. So issues around water access, menstrual hygiene management, as well as solid waste management were looked in under this project. Currently, the situation with solid waste management, if I zoom in a little bit on that issue, is that all the waste that is generated in a public space goes to our landfill. And what we see now is that our landfill is stressed and cannot function accordingly because all this waste is just taken there. And so this project looked at separating these streams of waste and managing them accordingly. So the organic waste undergoes anaerobic and aerobic digestion, and the inorganic recyclables are put up in what we call a material recovery facility, where the recyclables are sorted according to their different types, and they can go for either recycling or reuse. One of the barriers that I remember from this particular project experience was that the stakeholders involved did not have a very clear understanding of their roles and responsibilities. And that is inevitable with any pilot project. And the stakeholders were the marketeers themselves, the traders, the municipal council or the local authority, as we call it in our country. We also had some private sector involvement as well, and also a public school which shared a boundary with the market. And so what we did is we brought all of these stakeholders together in one room to actually clarify these issues and make it clear who does what and when they do it. And of course, financial and time implications for these responsibilities. But as we were going through this process, I personally noticed that the women involved in this particular project did not really come out very strong on where they see themselves responsible, number one. And number two, most of the suggestions, most of the input was coming in from the male folk. And so within that meeting, it was deliberate actions that were taken to make sure that their voice was heard, to make sure that their opinions were brought out, because it was noticed that within that space, you could see a resistance to actually speak about their role and their input when it comes to sanitation issues within their workspace. And so looking back and analyzing that situation, for me, I feel like creating these environments where communication is deliberate, especially for the women, is very cardinal within a project activity. Of course, coming up with innovative ways that we create spaces for the women to air their views and for these voices to be heard comes out as a strong point even for the success of a project. And so moving forward, I see myself taking much more of this perspective into consideration and not assuming, a role of when people are in a room together, then everyone's views will be heard. But I think taking a bit more deliberate action that the voices and the views of the women are heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is wonderful. And this issue of women speaking up and articulating for their needs and the diffidence in doing that, holding back, we see it around the world. I see it in the US all the time.
Yeah.
So sometimes the question is, and we ask ourselves, and I don't know that's the right answer, should we talk to women separately, where they may be freer to express their opinions, and then bring them together with the man. So I'm just throwing that out there as something we talk about all the time, because many times women hold back, especially when there are men present, and when they're talking about issues such as menstrual hygiene and things like that. They're not comfortable talking about that in the presence of men. So thank you.
Thank you, Pushpa.
Yes. Next is Angela.
Agnes. That's her real name.
Agnes, please go ahead.
Thank you for having me, Pushpa. My name is Agnes Luhanga. I'm from Malawi. I'm the founder of Nyalo Agribusiness Hub. So I work in the water space, I work in the agriculture sector, and I'm also an adjunct lecturer at Mzuzu University, where I lecture in courses of extension services in water resources management, social forestry and extension, as well as forest planning and administration. So the way I got involved with formulating my enterprise, my social enterprise, was when I noticed that there's a gap in terms of information access for rural women. They would like to get into spaces where they graduate from just subsistence agriculture, but also venture into commercial enterprises where they can be able to sell their produce. So my enterprise focuses not only on supporting them in the production aspect, in terms of conservation farming so that they can produce more, but also finding them markets for their produce. So I work in delivering agricultural advisory services, providing training services in terms of income generating activities for some sustainable environmental practices that can help them to generate income, such as beekeeping. So we specialize mostly in beekeeping and legume farming. So my experience that I would like to share, maybe it can be helpful to some women that want to take up leadership roles, is the first time when I wanted to put my vision into practice, like to start acting towards my vision and to venture into communities. It was difficult as a young woman, and I had to be able to instill confidence in the ladies that indeed I'm going to move them from being subsistence farmers towards a path in commercial agriculture. So I had to gain confidence. Because when you go, you deliver your messages, they have to be confident enough that you will indeed lead them. So I remember the first time I met with about 10 women farmers, and I was introducing a pilot project in bean farming. So out of the 10 women farmers, only 2 had put into practice what we discussed that we would do. So I was like, oh, that means maybe I wasn't confident enough in telling them about the plans and moving forward. So I started seeking professional growth opportunities in leadership, in entrepreneurship as well, because I had provided them with an incentive of bean seed, and the 2 women farmers had used the seed to do the pilot project, but the rest had used it for home consumption. So yeah, it's lessons that I learned, that importance of leadership when you're going into communities. You have to be able to have a strong voice to inspire the women to go forward. And since then, I've been able to get exposed to opportunities of funding where I've equipped 13 women farmers to venture into beekeeping. I won a grant after I got in the Academy for Women Entrepreneurs. I won a grant, so I started with $2,000. I bought beehives for the 13 women farmers, trained them in beekeeping, and they've started the beekeeping enterprise. And also, I've also managed to link about 52 women farmers to a market source where they've secured a contract farming market, and they'll be able to sell their produce to that market. And also train them in how to write grants. So what I noticed is the space for grant funding opportunities is favorable mostly to the learned community, but they target farming communities that really need it. They lack information, they lack the availability to be able to access and meet some certain requirements. For example, matching the grants, being able to save the little that they make to be able to match the grants. So these are some of the lessons that I've taken going forward, that I have to continue fighting for these women farmers and seeking opportunities for them, and as well as keep on being persistent, growing my networks to be able to deliver the information, the necessary information to these farming communities so they can advance into commercial agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, in some ways we may be in different parts of the world, but we have the same problems. That is, ourselves gaining the confidence and being articulate to convince other people to take on leadership roles. We have to be trained almost to do that, right? And also, grant writing and reaching out for resources is a challenge for all of us.
Yeah.
I can see, especially for farmers and farming women who are not entered that, how that could be a particular challenge. So, yeah, thank you for taking such a big project and helping them out with all of that. Yes. Okay, the last here, but not least, is Lulama Goveni from South Africa. Did I get that correct?
Yes, I can confirm that's my real name.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Pushpa.
The floor is yours.
So my name is Lula Mangobeni. I am a civil engineer and a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg. So my civil engineering work is not at the University of Johannesburg. As a civil engineer, my work focuses on the design of drainage systems. And as a lecturer, I teach project management, construction management, and urban hydraulics. So teaching young engineers how to design your drainage systems. My research interests, though, lie in water-sensitive design and sustainable sanitation in informal settlements. So what are known as, I know they're known as slums in some areas, because very often we think they are temporary in nature. So there's often very limited service delivery in those areas. So how can we then try and implement services that probably sounds like an oxymoron, make them a bit more livable and sustainable? And my career has provided me the opportunities to participate in projects where we can see the relevance of research in practice, because I think very often you think there's research and then there's industry. So just seeing the relevance of the work that we do in the communities that we work in. And as such, made me realize that not only does the work that we do matter, but as a female researcher, I matter in these spaces. One experience that I can share about, though the project didn't go as well as we had intended it to. But I think sometimes we can learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. And sometimes we don't want to talk about our failures, But this experience was very fundamental in grooming me as a young female engineer and researcher, particularly in the water service delivery space. The objective of this project, it was in the Western Cape. So this project was in the Western Cape in South Africa. So just to kind of give everybody context around Cape Town. The objective of this project was to address the housing and service delivery issue. So how can we because we are struggling with building houses at a pace that, there's a need. The goal was to provide serviced plots of land. So we were then supposed to provide showers and ablution facilities for every plot of land that facilitated the treatment and reuse of grey water. So that was the initial plan. And my role in this project was to work with the design engineer to then facilitate the community engagement process. Because remember, we come in as engineers and we've designed it. And you think just because the numbers check out, then it will work. And then you realize that, no, you haven't quite met all the objectives. So my role was to facilitate that community engagement process. So how do we get the community involved? How do we establish a project steering committee who would then be our communication point with the community? Because, you can imagine how difficult it can be to have 1,000 people at a meeting all the time. However, the barriers that we then faced in that project was that we had, the tensions between, because it was a pilot project, so the tensions between those who were getting, and as a pilot project, you could probably only afford like 50, 100 households, but the need is about 1,000. So because it was a pilot project, there were tensions between those who were getting and those who were not getting. And then subsequently, there were service delivery protests that arose. And unfortunately, though it was a great idea, the problem then came to a halt. To this day, we still haven't been able to revive that project. But the lessons learned from there, number one was that we need to put in deliberate effort into getting community buy-in, making sure that we get community buy-in. Because, when you look at the word community, we generally assume that because it's a community, everybody gets along, everybody understands one another. So when we have a project, then it calls for us to try and get people to unite around a common vision. To say, yes, we have different tensions, we have different political affiliations, different genders, but how can we unite around a common vision to meet this goal? And it calls for us to put in resources and time to facilitate that process. So it's something that we as engineers can learn, because essentially the infrastructure that we design and build is only as robust as the people that we design it for. And as a female in these spaces, the person that I was working with trusted me to lead this process. And though I did not trust myself. So it was a lesson for me to say, I mean, if this person can trust you, clearly there's something that you can do. And I mean, and to attend community meetings and small little me trying to talk to communities and actually have people listen was quite reassuring, and encouraged me in other projects where we have done drafting of policies, where we do go into communities, to now realize that I do have a voice and I do have capacity to lead these projects. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, all three. Yes. Again, you're right. As scientists and engineers, we just rush into these communities thinking it's so clear to us what the benefits are. You should all see it, without realizing how complex these communities are, and spending the effort to buy in is such a huge issue. Yeah. So with that, we have to say goodbye to our online audience, and Sherry has been monitoring them. So I think we're going to drop off the camera now. And we're here to engage with you, the audience here in the room. So we don't have to sit here. We can't sit here and answer questions, but we can come down and mingle with you, which is what CV wanted us to do, mingle with all of you. So please, any questions?